Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Phil Warman. I'm the training manager here at GL Assessment. Over the next half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, what I'd like to do is take you through the administration and setup for the baseline assessment. Just before we start going into any of that kind of detail, I'm sure you'll be asking about the latest stage in terms of government approval for these baseline assessments. I'm afraid, like you, we don't have any further news except to say that the government's decision has been delayed, and with the change of government, at least in terms of ministers, they are reviewing and will get back to us in the forthcoming days or weeks. We really just don't know, but today we'll be concentrating on the training. Okay. On the screen at the moment is just the details of the session. What I'd like to do is start off by going through starting up your own TestWise account, which is where you can add students to the register so that they're available for the training. And then after that, I'll be moving over to how that is reflected on the iPads or the Android devices, the tablets you have, in terms of the actual administration of the assessment. So starting off, I want to have a look at our website here, which is testingforschools.com. Those of you with very good eyesight will be able to see at the top of the screen that this actually says that it's the demo Testing for Schools site. That's because at the moment the assessment isn't released, so it's not on our main site, and I'm just using a demonstration site. When you are set up with the account, this is the screen you will go to, and in the space at the bottom where it says Enter TestWise by entering your customer ID, this will be supplied to you via email. This is a demo account, so I'm just going to log on there, hopefully. Okay, beyond that, if you're not used to the TestWise setup, it's kept very clean and easy. We've just got two choices. One is to enter the site as the person being tested or the person completing a survey. That's for the general use of our other online digital assessments. For the baseline, you'll actually be doing the assessment on an iPad or tablet device. So just ignore that one, and instead we'll enter as the administrator. You will be set up initially with a password, and then you can change this password to one of your choice. Again, I'm just going to log on to this demo site. And I think that's a first for me. I actually remembered my password on the first run through. So on this screen here, it's asking to select a subscription. One last time, this is a demo site, so I've got a number of assessments showing on the left-hand side of the page. This would not be your case. You would have just the one that was relevant to you. So I'm choosing baseline. On the screen, this space here also would be blank for you initially, because what's recorded on this first screen are reports that you've run previously. So it stores all previous reports, and you can go back to them and review them as and when you wish. The actual pupil details, the children's details, are beneath this tab here that's marked Register. If I just click on that, we have a number of students, pupils that have already been set up here. And it's that setting up of pupils that I want to cover first. Let me just check with colleagues. Can you see the arrow moving on the screen? Yeah, excellent. So if I just move up here to this first box, subscriptions, if I were to click on that, it would actually take me back to the previous page where I chose the assessment that I was going to be running, which is baseline. Just to make clear, this is not anything that the children themselves will see or be faced with. This is all done back of house, as it were, and it's the thing that's done first to have those children linked to the assessment that will be shown to them on the tablets. So if I move across one to add, I can add students individually, and it uses this simple form to add in their details. I should say that this, where it says required, very much are required, but also on the second page that's marked additional, it is important that we have in here this box external reference filled in. That external reference is required by the government specifically for baseline, so that we can send the results off to them, well, the scaled score result off to them, and what goes in there is the child's full postcode. Okay, the others are not compulsory, but I certainly would recommend that if you want to do further analysis of your results beyond this, it's actually very, very useful to have this additional material put in right at the start rather than having to try and add this in later. That's just the manual way of putting in children's names. If you were to click on import, this is perhaps the more standard way of doing it, and a file can be created by your management information system within the school in the form of a CSV file, and that file can then upload all the details to this TestWise account. Now, there is an example of the CSV file here, but if I click on that, it might be just a little while before it loads up. So I've got another example back on the PowerPoint slides, which I'll show you in just a moment. Just before that, so if I've created this file and it's in the format that I'm going to show you from the example, all that you would do is click on Update Files or Upload Files, and all that information would be taken on board. Before we look at anything else within the system in setting up students, pupils, let's just have a look at the example of that file that's to be created. I said it was a CSV file. This is an example, and this example exists within the teacher's guide that you will be sent alongside the assessment, and that will have, well, in fact, more detail than I'm able to even give you today, and will be a complete stepwise look through. But I've just taken an example from that so that you can see the general format. The one that's got a little green square around it is important because that UPN, although required in many of our digital assessments, is extremely important here because matching up individual pupils to a government requirement of a scaled score, obviously that's the very best way of doing it. So a UPN is required. Another one we've highlighted with a little green square is password. It is up to you to set a password for students. It will, if you don't set one, then that's fine. It will default to no password for the pupil. But if you do set one here when you're looking in the TestWise account, they will require that password when you're using the iPad or the Google device, the Android device. And the last one that I'm just going to draw your attention to, just to remind you, is that external reference. I mentioned it when we were looking at manually putting in names, but here it is again on this file upload. It is vital that you do put in the full postcode for the individual pupils as the external reference. It's shown there in that example anyway. What I'm going to do now, though, is come back out of the slideshow just to go back to our TestWise account so that we can look further at some of the functionality. So import is where we left off, which is where that file that you've created according to that example that was just given. If you were to click on exporting the data, that will allow you to, well, if I open one, it's nothing terribly exciting, so let's open it for you. I'll just change that. It just exports that data. So if you wanted to take that data to another system, to work on it, to reorder it, to take bits out of it, to further manipulate it, that would be the place to go. Just close that. Copy is where I can click on it, but I'm always slightly worried about the internet connection, so I think since it's not vital to the use of the assessment, I'll just tell you what that does rather than absolutely demonstrate it. You can actually take data if you have are using some of our other data assessments, our digital assessments, you can actually take data from those and import them or copy them into this register that you're creating here. Print, if you were to click on print, it would print out the names, the year groups, and so on. But it would also show their passwords. Now that's quite a useful little document for keeping with you, so that if for any reason you've forgotten a password that you've set up for an individual pupil, there's an easy way of finding it that doesn't require you to log onto this digital site. Group, I need to mention here, group is the group within the year. If you need to differentiate those within different classes or forms, this is the place for it here, and that's within a year group. Okay, some of the other functions that further down screen we'll be using as we go along. So names of the pupils down here, their year groups, the individual groups, sets, classes within the year group. Here is where the machine, the computer, keeps track of the various sections of the baseline that have been completed by the pupils. A bit further down you can see these green ticks, and in this person's case, that's Lucy Hadfield. She has actually completed the first 2 of the 3 sections. So overall that's partially completed, but not all the way through. I just mention again that we do anticipate that people will split up this assessment into its 3 parts, which are relatively short, around 10 minutes or so, rather than going through all 3 sections together. You may be wondering about the R there. If somebody has begun a test or for whatever reason haven't been able to complete it and has come out, it will actually, after 24 hours, reset to be able to be resat. So that student could then come back in. It would unfortunately take you back to the beginning of that section that the person had come out in without completing it the first time. Okay. In terms of viewing the details for individuals, if you just click against the side of an individual there, and we go over here to view details, it will remind you of their details, including any password that you set up for that student. In this case, there isn't a password for Theo. So choosing individuals is simply by clicking on the left-hand side. The next function next to view details is delete. I do need to offer some word of caution here, and that if you were to click on people and choose delete, it would do exactly that. It would delete that pupil. Not to be over worried, if the pupil has actually begun any of the sections and has recorded data, it won't allow you to delete that pupil. So in the case of perhaps a report you want to run later, but that child has left, gone somewhere else, you won't be able to delete that data, but you'll be able to miss them out in terms of the reporting. Okay, and report, surprisingly enough, is where we run reports. I'll just give you a quick run through of that. You can see here that we have very limited data in this demo account, and just one person appears to have done 2 of the sections. Oh, further down the list we have somebody else that has done all 3, and here's somebody that's available to resit those. So, but the mechanism's the same whether it's full of data or not. So if I was to choose select all, yes, it selects all the students, all the pupils. If I were to click on report, it will list the people that it's attempting to report on. If I go a little bit further and click on report, it's actually now going to offer me the various types of reports you can run. So it might be worth just mentioning those here and now. There's a group report for teachers. I'm not going to actually run these reports to show you the data within them on this site, because 2 or 3 pupils, the data is going to look very spiky indeed. But we do have a full set of sample reports available on the website, and I'm assured by my friends here with me today that that information will go out with the PowerPoint, so you'll have the link to a full set of sample reports. But just to give you an idea of what they are, there's a group report for teachers. They're built around audiences. So the group report for teachers will have the data for the individuals, but literally grouped for that whole group. It's an overview. An individual report for teachers on the pupils has more detail. Obviously, it will be individual by individual. And this is where the narrative that we talked about in the initial sort of launch of the product, this is where not only do we provide the data required for government and the standardized age scores that makes tracking for progress really useful for you, but also we're including narrative that has been produced by groups of specialists in the field linked to the scores within baseline that give you some points for guidance perhaps on the meaning of the data, things you might want to follow up with the individual. An individual report for parents is also an option there. That's very similar to the individual pupil report for teachers, smaller in content perhaps, and very much aimed at allowing parents to be able to feed into the process. Okay. Because I chose that large group and many of those don't have results, actually the software is quite smart. It will say and report to you that these students actually won't get a report. And as you can see, that's the vast majority in this case. So I won't be running the report here. And as I say, the sample report will be made available to you. In terms of functionality, though, if you can either select whole groups, you can select whole groups and then deselect individuals. This is particularly important if, as I said before, you can't delete the data for a pupil once they've got data there, but maybe they've left, maybe you don't want to report on it. We can deselect those students. I could not select everybody, but just select perhaps those that had actually got data and run reports on them. So really, there's a great deal of flexibility in how you might run reports from that side. There is also filtering options so that for any of the groups you are able to filter and also arrange alphabetically or the opposite of alphabetically as well. Okay, I think I may have to come back to parts of this, but I've pretty much covered that functionality. Let me just double check then. So how do we get the names of the pupils? We can either put them in one at a time manually. We can import them from a file. You've seen the example of the CSV file, which can be created from your management information system within school. We can, if you're have used digital assessments within TestWise in your school before, and you already have particular students set up, they can be copied to this particular register. We can export the data into other systems so that you can manipulate it. We can print it so that you can have a quick guide to any passwords that you may have set up. Running reports, we can run them for individuals or whole groups. Deleting, I've covered pretty much in depth about what you can and can't delete. Viewing details, if you are online and you want a quick look at passwords or any other bits of information, like the status log. Here it's showing that 2 of the sections have been completed and there's a third part to go. Okay, so I think that's pretty much everything. What I'm going to do now is switch back to the PowerPoint and have a look at the kind of things we've set up within that TestWise account done on the PC actually are reflected in terms of what appears on the tablet devices. So, let's get to the tablet devices. Well, you will need to run the assessment. You will actually need the assessment. It is an app. You will need to go, and the examples we're using, by the way, are for the Apple version, but the equivalent would be, I think, what's Google Store or something. Google Player, did you say? Yes, is the site for finding the app for the Android devices, but the mechanism's the same. So we click on the item. You can start putting in GL assessment because that's its name. So as soon as you get as far as probably GL and A, it will start coming up with suggestions. And my experience is there are very few that start GL space A, so you should be able to spot the GL assessment one, and then you just click on that one. You will then see that it starts loading it up. It's the one in the top left-hand corner on the one on the left-hand side, and then when it has loaded, it will appear on the screen. You will need to do this for the two tablets. It's a two-tablet delivery. One is a pupil tablet, one is a teacher tablet. At this stage, there's no difference between the two. We haven't defined them. That comes a little bit later. So, two tablets, make sure they've both got the assessment app on them. And click on it, and this is the screen you'll get. And at the bottom, it will say, Get Started, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So if we get started on both of those, it will ask for your customer ID. This customer ID is the one that's supplied in the email that allows you to actually set up the register on your PC. So that will be straightforward. Once you've put that in, it will bring up the assessment itself, which is baseline. You need to bring it up onto both of the tablets. Now, this is where we start differentiating between the two tablets. So what appears on the screen, they will actually look very similar, look the same list of names on both. And if I don't know whether you can still see my arrow, double checking. Yes, good. Where I'm hovering now on the left-hand tablet, it says log in as pupil. When we log in as pupil, that tablet will become the pupil tablet. And on the right-hand side, it says log in as teacher, and it's on a little toggle. And on that one, as soon as we log in as teacher, that right-hand tablet is the teacher's tablet. Okay? Here, you'll see that it says something rather enigmatic as pre-cache assets. That simply means that it downloads it to the device, so that if you're perhaps worried that Wi-Fi is a bit weak within your school, this will help that process. So, once we've got them set up, now one will be the pupil tablet, one will be the teacher tablet, and we're asked for a password. Remember, if you have set up passwords on the TestWise account, you will need them. If you haven't set up a password for the pupils, don't enter a password on the pupil's device. The teacher's tablet will require a password, and that password is your administrator's password. You get one given at the outset, but if you've changed it, be sure to make a note of it because you will need it here. Okay, assuming we've managed to put in our passwords, so still left-hand side pupil tablet, right-hand side teacher tablet, we can see the three sections that make up the assessment. The blue arrow here is showing that it's the first section that we will be doing, and the other two sections are won't be allowed to be started because we haven't finished the first. Once we click on that blue on both, we'll get a different message on the pupil tablet. It will actually give a setup connection number. Now, we don't suggest that the pupil does this. The teacher needs to take that number and enter it into the box. And then if we then click on connect, those two tablets will be synchronized. So as the teacher swipes from question to question, it will appear on that same thing will happen to the pupil's tablet, which is slaved to it. The pupil's tablet won't be able to set the pace. So this is the very first screen, a kind of holding screen, and it's the teacher that slides on slide to start. Here we start to look at the actual way that the questions are set up, and I'm not going to show you every question that is in all of the sections. I am going to show you a good selection of them, I hope, and if I'm able, I'll also be clicking on the sound. Okay, we've got some. This, of course, doesn't appear in the assessment. You've just got what appears on the screen. You can see that the pupil's tablet and the teacher's tablet are mirrored, except that on the teacher's tablet they have the ability to click on the Q. Q stands for the question itself. On some of the questions that are a bit longer, where they're actually introduced with a preamble, there'll also be a P option. That is P for prompt, and the teacher clicking on that it gives extra setup for that particular question. Then they'll need to press Q, and that gives the precise question that's associated with that. Okay, that's quite important, especially in some of the phoneme awareness sections, where the prompt might supply a word which the pupil repeats back before the question itself might ask them initial sounds or for segmentation. So in this case, I've gone a bit too quickly there. I should start by saying the question would be, look at this picture, point to she's drinking. And when we click on the question, we'll point to he's sitting. This one is actually recorded by touch. Some of the questions won't be recorded by the pupil touching the screen, but will in fact be an oral response where the teacher then records on their tablet whether that's correct or incorrect. That correct or incorrect won't be seen by the pupils. They won't be on their tablet getting any idea that they're being judged as right or wrong. Okay, that's another example. Look, the prompt here, you can see the P on this one that I was talking about. The prompt is look at the plates are dirty, look at the man is washing the plates, look, the plates are clean. I've stopped on this one because there are a number of questions, and the details are given in the teacher's guide, where you'll need to make a gesture to point to the various parts on the screen. That just doubly clarifies which parts are referring to the speech. And then the question itself asks about what the man did to the plates. Here we're looking at which picture shows many and which shows few. As I say, I'm not going to go through every question because you'll appreciate there are 3 sections as well, but I'm just going to pick out a few. This is, of course, language and communication. So I'm going to step through this fairly quickly, and you can see, without me talking over it, the kind of style. This is another one where we actually gesture. So this is about the pencil is short, we point to the bottom pencil, and this pencil is long, the middle pencil, and this pencil is even, and we point to the top pencil. Okay, and you can see this language and communication, it is very much not just about, it's not about words and phonemes, it is about feelings as well, in terms of emotions and actually being able to communicate in its widest sense. That's a preposition. That one's another gestured one about short and tall and taller and so on. Oh yes, it does say the question. Show me the girl is fed by the monkey. Okay, and this one is about a family group going to school and one little boy lagging behind, and can you show me who feels anxious? So that's actually quite a high level of difficulty. We do have to make sure that the questions actually differentiate right across the spectrum. Okay, I'm going to move off that onto this phoneme awareness. So that one, again, is prompt and question. Say, seesaw, and this is where we do expect the pupil to repeat that word back. So we wouldn't be pressing Q until that had happened successfully. If you can see the mortarboard symbol just in the left-hand corner of the right pad there, that is to tell you that that's a teaching item, if you like, or an example. It's not scored up, and although there is audio to this, you can actually reword the audio. You can make sure that the child really understands what it is they're going to do in the upcoming few questions. So this is an important kind of question where we have more of a license to come off-piste, as it were. But having said that, even within the others, we are aiming to use the audio, especially for somewhere pronunciation is so important, but there is scope for making sure that where reasonable adaptations have been done in the past, they can continue to be done for particular individuals. So, of the same type, ice cream, not saying ice, and so on. So here you can see we're cutting out the initial sound. And again, some of these are quite difficult. Okay, these are the phoneme awareness where I was talking about. We actually also include real and imaginary, nonsense, made up, whatever you'd like to call them, type words that we can be sure that the pupil won't have seen before, and they are actually phonologically decoding them. All that appears on the pupil's tablet is this ear symbol. That's just to remind them that they should be listening. When the teacher's tablet, when the teacher clicks on the P and the Q, it actually says the word, and the Q part asks them for the first sound it makes. And so it continues, made up words. You can see the pupil tablet not changing because, as I say, it just has the ear. And then the third section is the mathematics, and many of these are recorded by touching the screen. And when the individual touches the screen, that's actually shown on the teacher's tablet, so you can see what choice they've made. Although it would be worth maybe double-checking that they've made their final choice, as it were, by saying something consistent like, oh, I don't know, shall we try the next one? Try and avoid saying good or yes or no. Well, definitely don't differentiate between getting it right and getting it wrong, but if you consistently say something, that would be the best way, because then it doesn't become interpretable as, oh, I got that right, I got that wrong. And of course it clarifies when, if for a number of questions the pupil actually touches a number of things on the screen, you've got to know when they're finished and happy. So look at the red circle, it has dots in it. Now look at the white squares. One white square has the same number of dots as the red circle. Can you show me which one? And this is about numbers missed out on the calendar. So on. Some numbers there. Oh, and the one that we showed in the initial launch of this, about the fisherman hoping to catch 5 big fish. This is one of those where they could press multiple items, will need to press multiple items of fish out of the sea. So it is good to know when they're happy to move on. Okay, like that. Oh, that looks a little bit like Dusty Bin, doesn't it? Those of you that can remember that. Okay, I'm just moving through that fairly swiftly. Point to the fish tank, which is the smallest number of fish. Okay, so that's very much I'm just going to take it back to the beginning. There we are. That's a run-through of the initial administration of getting everything onto the TestWise account so that it's all set up and waiting for you on the tablet devices, and the run-through of how we get the tablet devices to actually download the app with the assessment, and how that's administered between the teacher and the pupil in actually doing the assessment. At the end of the sections, there will actually be a screen that says send results. It obviously, it seems fairly straightforward, but I just want to double check that obviously at the end of the section, you do need to click on send those results. And at that point, you can pause between the sections if you wish.